The first sound was the river cracking like a rifle shot in the cold, a sharp warning carried on the wind. Caleb Rourke reined his horse hard and leaned low in the saddle, eyes cutting through the grey dusk. The plains had gone quiet in that way. That meant trouble, not peace. He was a single father with a long ride behind him and a longer night ahead. Yet something pulled at his gut, as strong as a rope around his chest. The frozen river lay ahead like a sheet of broken glass, and near its edge a dark shape moved, then fell still. And in that instant Caleb knew this was no ordinary ride home. He dismounted slow, boots crunching over snow, hand resting near his coat where his revolver slept. Years on the frontier taught him caution before kindness, but the shape by the river was a woman. He could see that now, her hair dark against the white, her body twisted as if she had tried to crawl and failed. The wind worried at her thin shawl, and she did not rise when he called out. Caleb felt the cold bite deeper as he knelt, breath fogging. The river groaned again, and he imagined the ice giving way, imagined her slipping beneath, forgotten, and that thought stirred something fierce inside him. She was alive, barely, her lips blue, her eyes fluttering like trapped birds. He shook off his coat without thinking, the heavy wool smelling of horse and smoke, and wrapped it around her shoulders. She gasped then, a thin sound, and clutched the fabric like it was the last solid thing in the world. Widow's black marked her dress, torn and stiff with frost, and Caleb understood without words. Death followed her close. He had seen it before in towns burned out and graves dug shallow. He lifted her carefully, mindful of the ice and the ache in his arms from a long winter of work, as he carried her back from the riverbank. Memories pressed in, his own wife buried under a wooden cross on a hill west of here, his young son asleep by the fire waiting for him to return. Caleb did not look back at the river. He knew better than to tempt fate. The sky darkened fast, stars pricking through like nails, and he whispered to the woman, telling her she was safe now, though he did not know if it was true. The frontier made liars of good men. Still, he meant it with everything he had left. The cabin was small and sturdy, built with hands that had learned patience through loss. Caleb kicked the door shut behind them. Heat rushed out to meet the cold. His son Eli stirred on the pallet near the hearth. Blinking awake, Caleb laid the woman down near the fire, easing her onto blankets. Her shivering was violent now, like she might shake apart. He stoked the flames higher and fetched water, his movements quick and sure. Eli watched in silence, old beyond his years. The boy asked no questions, only handed his father a cloth, and did as told. When color crept back into the woman's face, she opened her eyes fully, fear flashing there sharp as a blade. Caleb stepped back a pace to give her space, his coat still wrapped around her. "You are safe here," he said, voice low and steady. She tried to speak and failed, tears freezing on her lashes. Eli moved closer and offered her a cup, his small hands careful. The woman drank, coughing, and whispered a name, not her own, a name heavy with grief. Caleb felt the weight of it settle into the room like snow on a roof. Later, as the night deepened, she told her story in broken pieces. Her husband lost to the winter trail, robbed and left by men with empty eyes, the town turning its back when her money ran out. She had walked until her legs failed, until the river took her strength. Caleb listened without interruption. He knew the sound of truth when he heard it, the kind that came from pain too deep to dress up. When she finished, she bowed her head, ashamed of needing help. Caleb shook his own head slowly. "There is no shame in surviving," he said, and meant it outside. The wind howled and the river cracked again, but inside the cabin held three souls drawn together by cold and chance. Caleb sat by the fire long after the others slept, watching the flames and thinking of roads not taken. He did not know what morning would bring. Trouble often followed mercy out here. Yet as he looked at his son and the woman resting under his coat, he felt something he had not felt in years, a spark of purpose. The frontier was cruel, but it had not taken everything from him yet. Dawn broke over the prairie like fire over dry grass, painting the snow in shades of gold and crimson. Caleb awoke first, the chill of night lingering in the corners of the cabin. He checked the woman, her breathing steady now, though pale still. Eli stirred beside him, rubbing eyes and whispering questions he did not ask aloud. Caleb poured water into a tin cup and handed it to the boy, the silence between them full of things they did not say. Life on the frontier had taught them both that words could wait, actions could not. The woman stirred, sitting up slowly, her fingers brushing at the wool of Caleb's coat still draped over her shoulders. She looked around the cabin with wary eyes. shadows of the night still clinging to her. Caleb offered her breakfast, simple bread and stew. He did not ask her name yet. The right time would come. Survival first, stories second. She nodded in gratitude, her lips trembling, and for a long moment, the three of them shared the warmth of the fire, watching the smoke curl up toward the low ceiling. Outside, the wind carried the promise of storms yet to come. By mid-morning, Caleb saddled his horse, the woman wrapped in layers of his old coats, Eli holding tight to the reins as they prepared to ride to town. News might be found there. Help might be found there. The prairie stretched wide and empty, a frozen wasteland dotted with skeletal trees, every sound amplified, every shadow a threat. Caleb rode first, revolver at his hip, eyes scanning the horizon, teaching Eli and the woman the lessons of caution that had kept him alive through many winters. A single misstep here meant death, and he did not intend to lose them. They rode in silence at first, the woman gripping the reins of her borrowed horse, knees trembling from cold and exhaustion. Eli glanced at her now and then, protective, silent, yet Caleb could see the questions burning behind his son's eyes, the kind that wanted to know why the world was so cruel, why men could leave widows to the river. Caleb said nothing aloud, only tightened his grip on the reins. The prairie seemed endless, and the wind bit through every layer, carrying the distant howl of wolves, a reminder that the frontier demanded more than courage. It demanded heart. When they reached the town, it lay under a veil of grey smoke and frozen mud, buildings leaning like tired men, windows dark, doors boarded, the main street empty but for a few men with hard eyes and harder fists. Caleb dismounted, holding the woman steady as she tried to find her footing, Eli close behind, and the weight of the town's apathy pressed against them like a wall. Caleb knew the people here, some by face, most by reputation. The law thin, greed thick, and help was measured in coin or blood. Whichever came first, they entered the general store, a bell above the door announcing their presence like a warning. The shopkeeper, a man with a face like old leather, looked up from counting coins, and his eyes flicked to the woman, then away, the kind of glance that meant trouble and judgment in equal measure. Caleb stepped forward, voice low and firm. "I need provisions, food, blankets, maybe work, for her and my boy." The man sniffed, lips curling. He wanted no trouble, and in a place like this, trouble often followed mercy, but Caleb had learned long ago that sometimes you had to take it by force, even if just with your presence. As they left the store, laden with supplies, the woman paused, her eyes scanning the street, whispers trailing behind her, men watching from doorways, children peeking from windows, townsfolk wary and hungry-eyed. She leaned on Caleb, shivering from more than cold, memories of the river clinging still. Caleb put an arm around her shoulders, guiding her, Eli carrying a bundle of blankets, and together they moved through the quiet town like a small spark through dry tinder, fragile yet impossible to ignore. The frontier had a way of testing anyone who dared to survive, and it had not finished with them yet. That evening, back at the cabin, Caleb built the fire higher, shadows dancing on the walls. The woman rested on a pile of blankets, Eli at her side, both of them quiet as the wind banged against the logs. Caleb sat with his boots near the hearth, thinking of the river, thinking of the road, thinking of men who would see a woman alone and weak as prey, and he vowed, under the fire's orange glow, that none would harm her while he drew breath. The frontier might be cruel, but he had learned to fight, and in the heart of that fight, he had discovered something he had almost forgotten: the raw, stubborn strength of family, of protection, of hope. The next morning the sky was heavy with snow, clouds low and grey, the wind slicing through every layer of wool and leather. Caleb checked the horizon as he packed supplies for the day, Eli helping where he could, the woman beside him wrapped tight in his coats, her eyes wary but trusting. She had survived the river, the cold, the town's silence, but the prairie was relentless, and every mile could bring danger in the shape of frostbite, wolves, or men with grudges. Caleb had faced all three before, yet the weight of responsibility pressed heavier with each step they rode west, toward a settlement rumored to offer work and safe harbor, the snow crunching beneath horse hooves, their breaths steaming in the frozen air. The woman clutched the reins, Eli holding the small pack of supplies, and Caleb led, eyes scanning the horizon for movement, shadow, or glint of steel. The plains stretched wide, endless, and the kind of emptiness that could drive a man mad if he looked too long. Yet Caleb pressed on, a determination sharpened by the memory of loss. the memory of rivers that claimed those who wandered alone by midnight. They spotted smoke curling from a distant cluster of buildings, a promise of warmth and human presence, yet Caleb knew better than to celebrate too soon. The frontier often disguised danger beneath the comfort of a hearth. As they approached, a group of men appeared on horseback, eyes dark, guns ready, cutting across the snow toward them. Caleb slowed, signaling to Eli and the woman to stay calm. The men called out, voices harsh and cold, words that carried a threat and no room for negotiation. And in that instant, Caleb's hand went to the revolver at his hip, ready to defend the fragile trust and warmth they carried. Words were exchanged, terse and full of warning. Caleb kept his posture steady, not yielding, not showing fear. The men tested him, circling, looking for weakness. But Caleb had learned that courage and patience often spoke louder than steel. The woman trembled behind him, Eli clutching her arm. And yet Caleb remained calm, his voice low, warning the men to back off, his eyes locked on theirs. Unflinching, the wind howled, snow whipped into their faces, and in that moment, the prairie seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see if mercy or violence would prevail. Hours passed before the men finally rode off, muttering threats that would not follow them beyond the plains. Caleb lowered his gun slowly, the tension in his arms easing, Eli exhaling sharply, the woman resting a hand on Caleb's arm. Gratitude unspoken but palpable. They continued toward the settlement, the first buildings looming larger, smoke rising from chimneys like signals of safety. The wind less biting now, the threat gone, yet the shadow of the prairie's cruelty remained, a reminder that survival was earned with every mile, every choice, every breath in the settlement. They found work in a small ranch on the edge of town. The owner, a stern but fair man who recognized determination in Caleb's eyes. The woman found a place near the stables, her hands learning the rhythm of chores, feeding horses, mending fences, tasks that kept her grounded and alive. Eli ran free, learning to ride stronger, to rope better, to understand the land. The three of them slowly knitting together a new life, a fragile but stubborn thread of hope growing stronger each day. The prairie still vast and indifferent, yet within that small ranch, they discovered warmth, belonging. Survival made human nights were spent by the fire, stories shared quietly, laughter slipping between the cracks of pain and memory, the woman learning to trust again, Eli finding joy in small victories, and Caleb, though ever watchful, feeling a sense of peace that had been foreign for years. The river, the cold, the threats all remembered but no longer defining, instead teaching, shaping, forging a resilience born of necessity and heart. The frontier still harsh, yet within that cabin and those horses and the small ranch, life had carved out a place for mercy, courage, and family. As the first snow of winter melted, revealing the thawing prairie, Caleb watched his son play with the woman. Laughter carried on the wind, and for a fleeting moment, the world seemed wide, bright, and full of possibility. The lessons of survival, of compassion, of strength and protection etched into their hearts. He knew dangers would come again, storms would return, men would still test them, but for now, they were safe, together, and the frontier had given them more than they had dared hope. It had given them life, and in that life, a second chance at family, at trust, at love, fragile but unbroken.